is it? I hearing the same old song. How come you ain't go Turkey for elections like Gypsy? You could be a minister. You could take charge of culture. You could be like Sudama, driving $1 million car. You're well qualified because you have a big PhD. Why not use your education like Eric and Rowley? Do like the great Attila the Hun in history. He won his seat elections 1950. Oh yeah. And tell them flat, Turkey not in that. I'm no doormat for them Red House rats. I'm not siding with Handel nor Manning. I'm not for MJC. To hell with PNM and UNC. I'm PPP, the Poor People's Party. This them I represent, and the Kaiso tell this the parliament. They like, come back. They like, oh, sweet music. Come back. I just tell all my critics, Red House politicians sick, deceitful to each other, and all of them concussor. But the Kaiso tent, my friend, engage his time-honored men, like the illustrious Kitchener, Stalin the superstar. Some like the mighty Shadows deal with poverty. Pink Panther and aloes are the tobaccos of society. Some like the lion-hearted Coco sing out fearlessly. Others like the Lamo stand for truth and honesty. Oh yeah. Car, house and loot, I don't give a hoot. I prefer truth and may not rebuke. I don't favor pistol or iguana. I'm for fairness and justice. Going up for elections can't give me this. I'm for people, black, white, yellow, purple. Race I don't compliment, and the kind so tend this may parliament. Remember? Yeah, if I should do like Gypsy, I would join the family of no loyalty and bacchanal and turn coats just like Kamal. For when Gypsy caused the uproar and walked through UNC door, tongue say his actions broke the law, and like Griffith he crossed the floor. So I intend to stay in the Kaiso body only, rather than join a political party. With Kaiso, the nation becomes my constituency. I know Dan Singh can come here and whine on me. So the PPP already chose me honorably to serve this country. In my chamber, Tommy Joseph is the speaker, and the opposition is all them have fingers of corruption. So don't confuse me with Gypsy or GB. Jack and Penny a cent, and the Kaiso 10 is the parliament. Rumba, sweet music. Ooh. Rumba, special verse not stand. Look. Kaiso and the Kaiso tent goes back to the days of enslavement, where under a spreading tamarind tree, black sung against whites fearlessly. To Kaiso they made their laws, to Kaiso they fought their wars. Kaiso and its sweet minor chords was the poor black man's house of lords. So Kaiso is our big insurance policy against dictators and the parasitic oligarchy. Kaiso is the atomic bomb in our possession for all who want to degrade our constitution. But yeah. So real Kaisonians are important men. They're bigger than Red House rats, my friend. They sing sociology and spew out philosophy. So to join the Red House set is to climb down from a king to a jamet. So no stand and grandstand. You are an important institution. You're more important than government. So are you welcome to Parliament. They like sweet music. They like the greatest of them all. Great parliamentarians. The nation's parliamentarians.
Oh, yes, good evening. Dr. Hollis Liverpool, the mighty chalk dust, at his best there. The tent is it, arguing that the Calypsonians are the real politicians. Real politicians. And there are lots of Calypsos on that topic. Lord Valentino has one that's called Kaisonians are the true opposition. David Rudder says, music to make a woman body turn into jelly and to make a politician cringe. Gypsy said, is I who cause you to win election, and is I who can bring your government down. Good evening to all of you and welcome to Politics 101, starting off there. And you all are going to understand why I play that. quite apart from the fact that the Calypsonian is arguing that the real true opposition are the artists, the creative people in our midst. I also play that because I think there's some people in our society, in all societies, who are not prepared to join one side or the other. You hear Chalky said there, I'm not on the UNC side, I'm not on the PNM side, I am for the people. And there's a way in which our Caribbean society has not come to grips with that type of person yet. That person who is not for one party or the other party. And what we often do is that we push such persons into corners. You know, if they criticize one party, you say they belong to the other party and so on. The society is so politically tribalized along party lines that it cannot come to grips with that person that Chuck Duss is talking about there. That person who stands there and speaks to the society without fear, that person who doesn't want a car from the government, that person who don't want a favor from the government. Our society in the Caribbean, in Guyana, we have not come to grips with that person yet. And I have to say that we have thrown up one or two of those persons over the last couple of years. And all you have to do is to tune in to Mr. Jack Dio's press conference on a Thursday, and you know who those persons are, persons who don't stand for one side or the other, but really speak out and speak up against what's happening. And of course, our guest tonight is one such person, GHK Lall, and he has been taking a lot of licking, mainly from the PPP side, because they have the power and they feel that such a person is more a threat to them. You know, some of us are predictable. We are opposition people, and they can always point to us and know where we're coming from. You know, Chuck Duss in another calypso said the real Calypsonian is a singer who say what you want to say without saying what you want to say. Some people say, you know, you must tell GHK Lall, he must write more easy for ordinary people to understand. You know, I used to hear that about my elder UC Guyana. Every now and again, I still hear it. Guyana speaks in parables, you know, they say. You know, one of the most dangerous bowlers in cricket is the leg break bowler, you know, or the bowler who slips in the googly. You know, it's a leg break bowler, but he bowls an half break with the same leg break action. It's hard to read. It's hard to read. You can't read them off the hand. You try to read them off the pitch. And sometimes by the time the ball pitches too quick for you to read them. Good evening. Please, you all share the link. Politics 101 is on tonight with GHK Lall. The 10th is it. The 10th is it. Good evening to all of you. I notice my country people are there. You all Buxtonians everywhere, but it's good. You know, if we don't have, if on a given night, everybody has decided that they ain't worrying with me, we know that you all Buxtonians gonna be there because you all not gonna allow me to sit down here by myself. Good evening, Lynette. Good evening, Orin. Good evening to my brother from Texas, Aubrey. Good evening to my brother from Toronto, brother Colin. All of you, and all of you who are honorary Buxtonians, who have been adopted into the Buxtonian family. Welcome to Politics 101. Please share the link. Please share the link. Tonight we're going to be talking. About that meeting, or let me put it this way. We are going to use that meeting between opposition leader Aubrey Norton and the president, who's the titular leader of the PPP, that they met on the issue of Venezuela and the border issue. And they met without preconditions. There was no shaking of hand before they meet. They met, and many people had views about that meeting. I would say the majority of people said, yes, this is what should be happening on a regular basis. And then there's some who said Mr. Norton should have gone into the meeting with conditions. He should have argued for the other issues that affect his supporters and to use the Venezuelan issue as a bargaining tool. Others have said he should not have gone there at all because the PPP set a trap for him and they were going to use the meeting as a photo op to show the world that they are governing in an equal and even-handed way. You know, there are two fact-finding missions in Guyana in the next coming weeks. One is there already, made up of assemblymen and women from New York. We heard about that fact-finding mission. They're here now as we speak. They've met with the government, they've met with the opposition, I think. And then another mission is coming in the middle of the month, mostly out of Atlanta, Georgia. These are some African American business people, African American assembly people, people who served in government, state assembly members of Georgia. So they're also coming, and both teams said that they are coming to Guyana in response to the charges made by the opposition that the government is engaged in racial discrimination. I say that to say that history has shown that whenever a government is whenever government is in trouble, it tries to use window dressing as a means of showing the world that it is not unfair as they're charging. And some are saying that maybe that meeting with Brother Norton was a way of putting something together for the fact-finding missions. I'm smiling. Good evening to all my wonderful friends in New Amsterdam. New Amsterdam is a place I like really bad. Bad. As a young man, I used to glad when you go into New Amsterdam because I like Chinese food. And New Amsterdam, when you go to New Amsterdam, they just give you the biggest portion of Chinese food. I don't know about now, because I ain't eat Chinese food in New Amsterdam in recent times. But in the old days, when you go to New Amsterdam, where they give whole Washington based Chinese food. And New Amsterdam has always been a place that is as a soft spot. And there's something about that tongue that, there's something about it. Good evening, Sister Alexis. Good evening, Sister Alexis, from New Amsterdam. Welcome to Politics 101. Sister Alexis is one of those supporters of the program. And she had something to do with the name of this program, because when I toyed with what to name the program, and I came up with Politics of 101, she was one of the persons that I bounced it off and said, what do you think? And she said, yes. Usually not a person that is very expressive, but she gave her blessing. So she has a patent, if you will, or patent, partly on it. Good evening, Sister Alexis. And yes, I call your name. Your name calling. You all remember that? When they catch the boy in Monrepo, voting more than one time, and Anil went there, and the people call in Amna and Basil Williams, and when Amna went there and she realized the boy voting more than one time, and Anil is there trying to defend the boy. I'm not saying Anil, your name calling. You all know I'm not. Anil, your name calling, and that thing has gone down in folklore. Welcome to Politics 101. So I'm saying that meeting between the opposition leader and the president has become a talking point. And GHK Lall and I are going to use that as our jumping off point tonight for our discussion. But when GHK and I agreed that that's what we're going to be talking about tonight, we didn't know that when we opened the Stabrook News this morning, there is the headline, Opposition Concerned at Breach of Commitments Following Ali Norton Meeting on Venezuela. And the article starts this way. The chief whip for APNU-AFC in Parliament, Christopher Jones, and Shadow Minister of Foreign Affairs, Amanzo Walton Desir, have written their counterparts, Gail Teixeira and Hugh Todd, respectively, expressing disquiet about breaches in commitments that had been made at the meeting between President Irfan Ali and opposition leader Aubrey Norton on the border crisis with Venezuela. The letters by Jones and Walton Desir of yesterday's date were released to the press. Walton Desir noted that at the Tuesday, 24th October 2023 meeting between Ali and Norton, it was agreed, one, that the government and the opposition will work together to confront Venezuela aggression and threat to our sovereignty and territorial integrity. Two, that the Parliamentary Sectorial Committee on Foreign Relations will be the forum through which the united approach of government and opposition vis-a-vis the Guyana-Venezuela territorial controversy will be addressed. Three, that the government has comprehensive statistics on the number of Venezuelan migrants / refugees and their locations across Guyana, and that Minister Todd will provide the Parliamentary Sectorial Committee on Foreign Relations with the said data at the committee meeting, which was scheduled as we say in Guyana, and did meet on the following day, Wednesday, 25th October. And four, that a motion will be prepared by the committee for the consideration of the National Assembly, which will form the basis of a joint parliamentary resolution on the Guyana-Venezuela territorial controversy. At the committee meeting, Walton Desir said that Todd indicated that because of several activities and factors, including the absence of both the Speaker and the Clerk of the National Assembly from the jurisdiction, he could not foresee the meeting happening for another 2 weeks before the second week in November. Consequently, it was agreed that the opposition and government chief whips would coordinate and set an agreed date for the proposed extraordinary sitting of the Assembly. Walton Desir said it was also agreed that the draft text of a motion prepared by the opposition and shared with the committee will be reviewed and amended as necessary, and that the final output would be the motion debated at the extraordinary sitting of the National Assembly, which will form the basis of a joint resolution. However, contrary to these agreements, the requested statistics were not provided at the committee meeting. Consequently, the information to inform the debate was not made available to the opposition. Additionally, a second draft of the text of the proposed motion from the parliamentary opposition has since been shared with the government for its consideration. To date, we have received no feedback. Consequently, there is no motion that has been agreed to as was discussed and agreed to in the meeting between the president and the opposition leader. Unfortunately, we are now in receipt of a notice which proposes an extraordinary sitting of the National Assembly on Friday, November 3rd, a date arrived at without consultation with the opposition chief whip, as agreed. In addition, we are without an agreed to motion for consideration. It follows, therefore, that the government failed to do what is necessary for us to have a sitting in which we are united to confront Venezuela. We desire such a sitting. In these circumstances, we urge the government to do everything to ensure that whenever we meet, we are united against Venezuela. End of the news story. I know I keep GHK waiting, but I wanted to share that. And I know plenty of y'all already say, it's same thing we said. Good evening to all of you from the Namstel, Williana. I think I met Williana on my visits to my second village, Denamstel. So there are people from Denamstel other than Rhonda. Good evening, Williana. Good evening, Emily. Emily is a trooper. Let me bring in our guest, Gabriel GHK Lall. I don't stand for one side or the other. I tell it as it is. You call it what? Hard truths. I think Chuck Doss had you in mind when he wrote and sang that calypso. Good evening. Talk to me.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, David. Good to be here.
Yes. So we said we're going to talk about this meeting. And I know you have written positively about the possibilities for our country when the president and the opposition leader met. And for you, you think that this should be a permanent condition. But here we have this news story in the Stabrook News today, which I'm sure that you have read. First of all, give us your initial reaction when the two sides met.
Well, I thought it was a very good thing. We haven't seen that for the longest while. We haven't seen that for over 3 years. And we have had criticisms of why it should have been and why it is not happening. I think the criticisms are justified. It was good, therefore, to see the opposition leader and the president in the same room around the same table. Regrettably, it took a crisis of serious proportions to bring them together, for them to have a meeting of the minds to meet. I think this tells the story of Guyana, that we got to get almost a dead before we talk to each other. Somebody got for dead? I mean, I'm lapsing into the Creolese very early here, but it shouldn't be that way. Democracy is about exchange, it's about communication, it's about working together through the thickets and the thorns to get to that place of understanding. A country with our history, with our deep polarization, should be looking for every opportunity for us to have more than a photo handshake, perhaps for us to have a mental embrace. It took Venezuela, the developments over there, to bring us together. So, Dr. Hines, and to our listeners, I could only think the very best of that meeting. Because for me, if it didn't happen, if the opposition leader had rebuffed whatever overture was made to him, then it would have been, well, you are anti patriotic, you are partisan, and you are rancidly so. And there is nothing for us. If we can't work on this, then what can we agree to work on? What can we even have the first word to speak about if we can't talk about Venezuela when it is rattling sabers, unsheathing swords, and really in our faces? I think, again, for the third time, I'm going to say that it was good to see those two brothers and their teams in a room, and I thought it provided the springboard, the launch pad for us to get to other things once we have the Venezuelan situation, controversy in a place where we are comfortable.
Gabriel, yes, and I myself, I am on record on this program as saying that I welcomed, and I said that I know of something called political fatigue, of people in the society, including supporters of both sides. They will be out there supporting both sides, but there is fatigue, and whenever the leaderships meet like that, it gives the people a break, a little breathing space. We are, after all, human beings. We are a society of human beings, and it gives us a breathing space to be normal human beings, in a different way. It's normal to oppose each other, but it's also normal to see us, our representatives, meeting in an amicable way. And so I join you in my initial response. But were you understanding of those who were apprehensive, especially those on the opposition side, who have gone through 3 years of what they call disrespect of their leader and their leaders by the opposition, the president putting conditions to meet formally and informally with the leader of the opposition, that Ipadaji has begged the government several times to meet, it never met. Were you understanding, as I was, of those who held the view that Norton should have played hardline with that meeting?
Well, how can I not be? Look, as a reasonable man, how can I not be after 3 years of vilification and demonization and disrespect and put downs? And so people feel that the opposition is being used. It's being used. After all the abuse, you are using me now because you got your back against the wall, because you're there in a hole, because you're there bad. So you know me. You know me now. And I will cut past the cosmetics of putting on an appearance for the rest of the world and look how the government is doing well. Let's cut through that. At the risk of being used, I think, and I will stand by this, and I'm sure that you will, we may not agree with many other things, that the opposition leader and the opposition as a whole, with Mr. Ramjatan there, did the right thing. They did the only thing. So it's on record now as, look, we made a good faith effort. We give it our all. We extended our hand also in brotherhood and friendship at this time of national need. You cannot erase that. So, with due respect and with some degree of empathy to opposition supporters, say, Ma, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't go there. You shouldn't let them banner use you. My position is you've got to take. We've been saying this here, David. You've got to take the high ground, and the high ground in this thing. This is patriotism is not an anachronism. I mean, here we go with the big words. Patriotism is not a dead letter. Patriotism is real. We got to live it. And I think Aubrey Norton and the opposition lived it. I think we got to give credit where it's due. The PPP lived it by saying, come, let me sit down in the same room. And I think at this point, we've got to discard the misgivings and the uncertainties. We've got to look for the better angels in our systems and say, good gonna come out of this.
And I want to zero in on two words you use there, and that is use and good. And I remember Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. during the period of the waning days of the civil rights movement and the transitioning into the Black Power movement, that the Black Power leaders, Stokely Carmichael and others, the Young Turks, people who you've referenced on this program before, they couldn't get King to sign on to the slogan. And they sought many opportunities to at least get King on the same platform with them when they were using the slogan. And a couple of occasions they succeeded in doing that. And the press asked King about being used. And King said, well, he's been used many times in his career, and he did not mind being used again, but he stuck to his position. And so I make that point to say that sometimes political using is not such a bad thing. It can have positive consequences. And of course, you mentioned good. And here is my question to you. What good that meeting did for our country? What good that meeting did for our country?
It tells us that when the circumstances are conducive and when we have a mind that is bent towards that, when we see the big picture, the nation, as opposed to the party, as opposed to my interest versus your interest, when we see 750 or 80,000 or 800,000 Guyanese depending on a conversation, on an assembly, then the good that comes out of that, as leaders go in this country, followers go, supporters go. So at least some of that moment trickles down, touches somebody, touches some village, some community, and say, you know what? We could get some way. We could find we way. And we have to look at the end of the day. Look, I'm not going to bash anybody here. We're not. It doesn't do us any good. It's counterproductive. We can go to the international community and do this and that and A, B, and C, and I think that is being done, and that's good. But at the end of the day, we have to face each other and link our arms together to deal with this matter that is hanging over our head. The good that comes out of there, it bridges us as a people. I think I wrote something for the Village Voice this week. I said, the Venezuelan crisis gives the president the opportunity to refine and to perfect his one Guyana vision and to demonstrate to us how authentic it is. Because if we can't do that now, if we can't treat the opposition as an equal, as people with rights and with needs, then we ain't got no way for go. So I'm saying the good that it comes from there is the first step in a multifaceted, in a long journey, and we've taken the first step. Yes, I heard about the setbacks of November, what happened, and we'll get to that. But we've taken the first step. We've broken the ice. I think there's something on which we can grasp and grow. It's going to be painful, it's going to be slow, but we've got something to go on, and that's good.
All right. So we have gotten the philosophical gaze, as it were, practical politics. At the time that you were hoping that we are going somewhere, we're opening some little cracks that can become doors. Given what you know of the PPP and the way it dealt with the dialogue during the period of the Hoyt administration, well, the Hoyt leadership of the opposition, coming out of the Ordmonson Accord, dialogue was suggested, the dialogue got going, and very early we saw the PPP not honoring the dialogue. And Dr. Luncheon actually said the two sides were meeting, but they were not meeting as equals. The dialogue eventually died. But given that history, even as you hope that the good angels, as you put them, were you practical enough to believe that it was not going to be as smooth sailing as the good angels would like it to be?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, look, we're dealing with a government that has as its primary aim the retention of power. And that statistics business has a lot to do with that.
Mhm.
So if you're dealing with retention of power as your primary, your paramount issue, your paramount ambition, concern, then where does border controversy fit into that scheme of things? So practically, I'm saying to myself, well, we're going to get some good out of this. Only for 2 days later, 3 days later, that was the 24th, 25, 26, on October 26th, it's got to be, or last Thursday, when our brother, the vice president, had his weekly press conference, and he said what he had to say about me, and I think I take that for what it is. I don't listen to the guy. But what came to me was that he seized the opportunity to go after the opposition leader on whatever he did. Look, man, we've got a crisis on our hands. We've got a situation that threatens us. And at this point, 2 days after, we've got to start governing and leading as opposed to playing politics with every damn thing. This is not the time for politics. And I think, I thought it would have come later. I thought it would have been a bit more subdued. You know, we're going to deal with the politics later. But practically, I'm saying to myself, look, I became an opposition supporter then. Is like, beyond the using, you're getting used and whatever. I said, am I being real? Am I being honest with myself? But we've got to overcome that doubt. You mentioned Martin. I've read a number of biographies about him. I'm sure there were times when he sat down and said, Lord, what kind of work you give me here for do? Right? I mean, sometimes I ask myself, but the road you've gone so far down the road that there is no turning back. So I am looking at this. This is no spin here. I'm looking upon this. Look, the PPP can't do this alone. The PNC, the opposition can't do this alone. We only give ourselves a fighting chance, maybe the wrong choice of words, if we are together in this situation. There are no two ways about that. Practically speaking, well, expansively speaking, I was thinking that from this here now, we're talking about the government reaching out to the opposition and in feeling that it's entitled or it has a right to its support in circumstances that are driven by Venezuela. Holding that thought there for a moment, it's got to be remembered that the opposition has almost half the electorate and they have rights too. And therefore, that has to count for something when we have settled, when we have moved past the Venezuelan situation in a better frame of mind. Practically, the short answer, I felt that some shafting was going to happen, and it did.
Yes.
But I'm suppressing that. I was suppressing that then. I'm still suppressing that now. There's some time. We've lost some time, which we cannot afford, and now we've got some time to make good on some of those promises, which I'm sure you're going to want to delve into.
Yes. And so the Jaglio press conference, in a sense, let the cat out of the bag, that the government was not going to deal with this um, in as honorable a way as we would have wanted them to deal with it. I think you're showing me there
Yeah.
something.
I don't know if you
Um,
could see this. This is
no.
something somebody sent me,
Uh-huh.
right? It's a picture, and I think it's real, of a Venezuelan, a Spanish speaking gentleman, young fella, and the vice president has been making the rounds, right?
Uh-huh.
And the fella is speaking in Spanish and thanking the government, the PPP, for being so good to Venezuelans. That's politics. But then it didn't stop there. And the AP and UN want we.
There you go.
So when you infuse into a migrant, whoever's the source of that, that additional toxic phrase, then your question has even more poignancy and relevancy. How practical are we when something like this could happen? That, you know, well, the PPP want we here, but the opposition here want we here. So there's a lot of hinging on that statistics. There's a lot hinging on some of those things that have not been delivered. I am delighted to hear that they will meet on the 10th, but I'm asking myself, why so late in the day? That's 17 days after October 24th. We
And,
don't
and,
have,
and let us expand a little bit on that statistics thing, because I have theorized on this program that we have two dangers facing us at the same time. One danger is the military danger and the danger in terms of our sovereignty. But we have a second danger, and that is the migrants that are coming from Venezuela. The issue has now become politicized. The issue has now become part of our election um, speculation, and that the PPP, while wanting, I think, Venezuela to stop saber rattling, they also want Venezuelans to come here because they could benefit from it electorally. And one could argue that theoretically the opposition could benefit from Venezuelans coming in theoretically. But that story you told me there shows already that one side recognizes that and is prepared to play that political game. Is the Venezuelan issue, Gabriel, a cut and dry issue that has to do with our patriotism, or is it something that is much more complex? Patriotism is at the center of it, but Venezuela has now become a complex issue.
yes, yes, it is very, very complex. Let's look at the context of Venezuela, and then we'll come to the statistics. The context of Venezuela is that Mr. Maduro has found himself in a hole. That referendum, the results of it, we don't have to predict. It's guaranteed to be done as though as though it happened yesterday, and it's over. And the results are yes, 99, 100%. We Essequibo is ours, right? So Maduro has two choices. Three choices really. He can stand still, a problem. He can stand down, a bigger problem, or he can stand forward, which means he deals with Guyana. Then he's got an even bigger problem that the international community will be all over him. We've got the US sanctions, etc. I say that he's backed himself into a corner, the law of unintended consequences, because a Venezuelan general, very powerful in the army and known to control the sindicatos, is watching him like a hawk and has already made some sounds. The opposition is sitting on his hands, and he really can't back down. That's the context over there. Here, we have this statistics thing. How many Venezuelans are really here? 50,000? I think not. I think you start talking 80, 90, 100 and north of that, then you're now talking the real numbers. Are all of them economic migrants like me and you? I think not quite. Not quite. As a migrant, and I'm sure you share the same sentiments, 31 years in the United States in different communities, I welcome my economic migrants. But we've got other people here, because when you see some of the videos of some of the people that are coming here, they don't look like well, I mean, we don't really know what an economic migrant look like. But you've got some folks there that can cause us some trouble. Okay, statistically, let's focus on this here. We have that tape that nobody could have seen. A fella speaking in Spanish and said the PPP want we here and we thank them for that, and the AP and you don't want we, and so on and so forth. Now, the statistics the data were supposed to be presented the next day, which is October 25th. Please correct me as I go along. Today is November 1st, and nothing like the in showing up yet. So the government is in a situation like Maduro. It presents the statistics and locations to the opposition, and they go from there. Or it doesn't, and it opens itself to every kind of speculation, none of them positive or in its favor, as to why it's holding on to this. I'll tell you a little story. I'll tell our audience a little story. A Guyanese, was doing some construction on his premises. And he had a team of workers, among which were some Venezuelans. And some government officials, Bureau of Census, Bureau of Statistics, came to his place and took census details from him. Okay? Now, I don't know that this was going on. And then they turned around and took details from the Venezuelans. And he's going about his business, and then something struck him, the Guyanese, and he said, "Hey, what address are you using for those guys?" And they said to him, "His address." And he's like, wait a minute. These guys going to do something. The police is going to come here. I am going to take this and lead us elsewhere. How many of these exercises do we have where Venezuelans are being registered, whatever the addresses are, and you add them up, and now they have ID cards, and you know what that means.
Yes.
And
the
audience know.
Yes. Place of residence.
Yes. You can do so many things here, including come 2025. So is that why the statistics are not being released? How many of these people we got here? And what is their position? And what do we do with them? How do we deal with them? So it is troubling to me, maybe even suspicious, that 24th, 25th, the rest of October, and that data, maybe the government doesn't know. But I don't think nobody knows in this country the real accurate picture of how many Venezuelans are here, legal and illegal. But it's a big number. We could tell ourselves it's a big number. Where money there, where opportunity is, people, migrants flock, and they're right at the neighborhood, like Mexicans in the United States. You're in Arizona, so you know, okay? And the border states. All right, good. So That statistics part is a worrying thing to me. And here's another thing that I want to put before you and before our audience. This Venezuelan controversy is something that has to be treated with the highest level degree of urgency. Yet it seems to me that the government is sort of casual, complacent, comfortable. Maybe comfortable is the word. It seems to be like, all right, it's business as usual. Yes, the president has gone around and done what he's done, and so on and so forth. And I think that the Venezuelan really tore into him. That's the thing. And so, really, a lot hinges on this statistical data that suddenly is not being put on the table before the opposition. And you can read anything into that, and none of it is good. The fact that it's not being presented, and it's taking so long to present.
It's taken so long to present. Good evening, Yvonne McPherson. I think I know that name. Um, Good evening to you, or good night to you, wherever you are. Good morning, maybe wherever you are. It's so wonderful to have all of you join us at these hours of the night. It's a commitment to the project that we are and we have been embarked on. And it's a project that has to do not just with opposing a government, because I like to say that part of our mission here, certainly on this program, is not just to oppose a government. And as I see it, we have to remove this government electorally in order to clear the way for a democratization and normalization of our society. But I would like to think that we are doing something greater than that. That is, that we are preparing this society, preparing our country, preparing our people wherever they are, whether they are in Guyana or outside of Guyana, for a place that Guyana eventually is going to go. In spite of the government and despite all that is happening around us, because we are being driven by the petrodollars. We are now a petrol state, and that has an engine of its own. And we as a people have to prepare ourselves to deal with being members of a petrol state, in spite of the APNU and the PPP. And part of what I think that I am doing here on this program is exactly that. And that is why I always bring those other dimensions in, the regional dimension, the global dimension, into it. So we are doing two things. We are doing the partisan work, yes, but we're also doing that bigger work, and that is to help to prepare our nation. Because if you're a supporter of the opposition, and the opposition wins the next election and gets into government, it has to govern. And it has to govern differently from how you think the PPP is governed. And it has to have a population, a support base that is prepared to push it in a direction. If we are saying that the PPP supporters are not pushing their party in a progressive direction, then opposition supporters have to prepare themselves to push their party, if and when it gets into government, in a progressive direction. And I think that is part of what I want to contribute to, part of what I do on this program. Gabriel, is the PPP, and you mentioned it is not behaving like a government whose country is under siege, like a government whose country is under threat. I've said Venezuela is not going to invade us tomorrow, but they can invade us with migrants who may not all be economic migrants. They can invade us with threats that can have an impact on investment. Already we saw it at the last auction. We didn't get the critical mass of companies flocking to bid for oil blocks. Um, very importantly, very importantly, not a single bid came from the English-speaking Caribbean. Not a single bid came from investors from Jamaica, Venice, Antigua, Trinidad, anywhere. And I think that is instructive. One can theorize that maybe people are looking at the Venezuelan threat. So I'm making the point that by just doing their things, the Venezuelans could be chasing away investors from Guyana. You see? So our government has to be proactive, and it is not being proactive. Is the government, Gabriel, is the government preparing to sacrifice one objective? Because I do believe the government has a twin objective. One is to use the crisis to maintain itself in power, to use it as a way of gaining leverage for the next election. That's one objective. The other objective, of course, is the objective that all of us share, and that is to beat back the Venezuelan threat. Is the government showing signs of sacrificing one for the other?
Well, I'm particularly concerned about its lack of urgency, like I've said before. You go around this town, when I say town, I mean this country, and the government is pretty involved with billboards or can get its people to have billboards about. Is there one billboard that says Essequibo is ours? I haven't seen that. I haven't heard anybody talk about that. This government is very, very good at public relations. There's none better at it in this country. And yet the Venezuelans have beaten our government in the public relations game. The Venezuelans are talking about Guyana beating the drums of war, of Guyana being in the pocket of imperialists. Now, regardless of what our private thoughts are, I think that the government ought to have been on the offensive in terms of how it handled the public relations part. We've talked about educating and making aware the Guyanese public, and there have been talks about that. But that sense of driving urgency, and I will repeat this word, urgency, I just don't get it. I don't feel it. We got to have it, to use a basketball term, full court press here. And what else is going on in the PPP's head, its brain trust head, that we don't know about? And when I don't know things, I get a little shaky, right? So it is too quiet, not too quiet, it's too nonchalant, to use that word. Yes, the president is about, and yes, there's reaching out to the international community and so on and so on and so forth. But somehow I feel from the grassroots up, we need to have been much more engaged. The population has to be more engaged. Guyanese should be really, really at a pitch where the Venezuelans are, and we are not. And I feel there's so much time has been lost, and so much groundwork. I saw that the chief whips before this November 10th, which is a good thing announcement. But it's the bad thing about it is it's a week and a half away. It's a week and a half away. I think that the Speaker of the House, the Honorable Speaker of the House, and the distinguished clerk of the National Assembly, wherever they were, fly fishing in Wisconsin or skiing on the Himalayas or something, they ought to have been brought back in this country forthwith. And Parliament had to be in full assembly. And October 10th, I understand, is when Parliament should have been reconvened. So we're talking November 10th, we're talking a month later, and this Venezuelan crisis has been going from strength to strength on their side of the border. So what is really going on in the head of the government? We have the president hasn't said anything negative or derogatory against the opposition, and we thank him for that. On the other hand, it's business as usual for the vice president. And I'm saying, What do we have here? We have to have all hands on deck and all minds in the same place. So, what is it that the vice president is working on that we don't know? Could be working on. Now, the Chinese have a huge footprint in Venezuela, and the Chinese are in Guyana, and the Chinese have their own relationship with the vice president. What does that mean? What does that mean in terms of this border controversy here? The statistics that we keep harping about. How many Venezuelans are here, and to what use have they been put, and what visions are in mind for them, and how far have those visions been are in place in terms of registering them and so on and so forth. Now, economic migrants, we're calling this migration. I think really what is happening here, we have been subject to an occupation on a very, very structured basis, on a very methodical basis, because the more people you have here, the more Venezuela can make up its claims about its people under threat, and it's got so many people here. Look, we could easily have, what's it, 100, that's about what? Call it, that's about 12% of our population from a hostile neighbor. From a hostile neighbor. I mean, these people are not all passive economic migrants saying we are going about our business and trying to feed our families. Most of them are, but if we got enough of them that are not thinking along those ways, that's a problem for us. And if those can be used to destabilize this country, we don't know at this point where the government can take this to its advantage.
Where the government can take this disadvantage. Good evening to all of you. Good night to some of you. All of you. Jackie Beard, Michael, Rashley, Yvonne McPherson. I'm talking my memory back 50 years because I think my bright schoolmate middle name was Yvonne. You know, when I walk through my village and I hear people say Samuel, I say that gotta be somebody I got to school with primary school. Because Samuel, of course, is my middle name, and anybody call me by middle name, they went to school with me. Yvonne, if you are my schoolmate of 50 years, my bright schoolmate, good night to you, and it's always good to see you on and up so late. Gabriel, optimistic despite that letter there by Amanza Walton Desir. Optimistic?
Well, if we don't have hope, then what do we have, my brother? If you some churchmen, I think a couple of years ago before COVID, I think it was some Anglican churchmen actually say hopelessness is an evil.
Yes.
If you reduce a population to hopelessness, or if you take away hope from you and me, then what do we have left? So here's where I am. I got a look on this that we have got an opportunity to bring our people together. Our leadership has set that tone to some extent. I think the opposition has overextended itself, rightly so, and we've got to build on that. Despite the setbacks, despite the foot dragging, despite I hear the Honorable Minister of Parliamentary Affairs, the government chief whip, saying about at the earliest time and as early as soon as possible. I mean, this is not time to be writing letters. Get on the phone, get somebody a driver, and if you can't get a driver, catch a minibus and go and meet somebody and sit down and say, here we are, we have got this issue, we're gonna work for you and this gonna work for me, and let us get our people in. You're gonna tell me that the thing don't work, so, and this one there overseas. No. Venezuela didn't just drop on us. If we got any sense of self, of proportion, we got to know from the time we start digging for the oil out there, through Exxon and the rest of them chaps, that these people sit down and say, here, you know what, there's we oil they carrying away there. There's we gold that digging up there. So therefore, as part of your routine contingency, this at the back of your head. This is where going back to this thing about urgency. So when you can tell me now about well, we're gonna write this letter and we have not no. We got to be galloping, we've got to be galvanized to that point where we're like, we want to get to the next date where we're in the same thing. Look, I'm gonna make a suggestion here. I don't know how well it's gonna go across, it doesn't matter to me. The president should have addressed the nation. And you're going to identify with this. Like when the US presidents do a State of the Union, the Speaker of the House is there. That's not a hard one. And the Leader of the Opposition is there in that same frame. Come on, you want to get across and emphasize to the Guyanese people that at this moment, for this purpose, with these circumstances, this is where we are. This is where we are. The foreign minister and the shadow opposition foreign minister should be having joint presentations. We are in this together and we are dealing with this from one head. I'm seeing that. And I'm asking myself, and the government has to drive that bus. The government, let us not quibble here. The government has to drive that bus, and it isn't even there in the driver's seat yet. I don't know it kicking at the tire, it going wrong and see if a dog peeing on the tire or whatever, excuse me, folks, and so on. Look, let's cut the nonsense out. The 24th of October, all right, good. You break the ice. We shouldn't be talking about November 10th now. We should have already had this. We should have had a number of conversations and saying, all right, the speaker and the clerk of the assembly are going to be back. They should have been back, the 24th. They should have been back that same weekend. They got to cut short this thing, right? And we are ready to be. The president has to. Let's say that national address to the nation has to be done from Parliament, not from State House. You're going to look for ways to convey to the nation that the government and the opposition are as one in this particular situation. And they're going to be one every appearance, every day, and every year. They're going to quibble. Look, we are people and there are going to be disagreements in the back. But what is happening on November 10th, a good thing, a good development, is too far away. Should have happened. That is not going to change. It's like, why 1.5 weeks from now when we've already lost a week? Why? Where is that press? Where is that momentum that we need? And this is where I think this is all in the government's lap. I haven't heard the opposition say, well, we ain't got a quorum and we got to talk to we people and we not available. They're saying, well, where you stand, buddy? Talk to me. Tell me something. We are waiting here. This is part of the commitments that were made that we are gonna go forward and share, inspire the Guyanese people that this is where things are right now. And this is where your political leadership is. I ain't seen it.
Not seen it. GHK Lall here. GHK, you can catch his columns in the Kaichur News. He writes sometimes for the Village Voice. His letters are there sometimes in the Stabrook News. And do you still do that piece on Kaichur Radio?
Yes, I do.
TV?
Yes.
What days can we catch you?
Well, it's which piece you're talking about?
You usually you would do a piece around the news time.
Yeah, every day.
Yes, it's every day.
Monday to Friday.
Monday to Friday. What time?
It's usually at around 12:15 after the news.
And the name?
I'm sorry, the National Outlook.
The National Outlook. That's what I've been forgetting.
And for the musically oriented, there's a Sunday morning program at 8 o'clock where you can hear Sam Cooke and Brooke Benton and the rest.
DJ GHK Lall. GHK, is always a pleasure having you here. I wish we could have you more often, but you wear so many hats these days. It's a pleasure having you certainly at least once per month to bring your perspective to bear on our program. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And to those of you here this evening, thank you all for staying with the program. Tomorrow night, I'm going to have Vincent Alexander. We're going to continue the discussion on the Venezuela issue and other issues as they relate to our country. As usual, I can say how thankful I am to you, the audience. There's no show without an audience. There is no class without students. The teacher can stand there, the teachers can stand there, and if there are no students, there is no class. There is no country without citizens. And we want our citizens to be informed citizens, to be mobilized citizens, to be conscious citizens. At the end of the day, our country will benefit. Thank you all so much. And the watchword is always love. Plenty, plenty, plenty love. I see you all tomorrow. Vincent Alexander is going to be here with me. Good night.